Hello and welcome to the big picture. After having been recognized internationally as the most dreaded terrorist organization, Islamic State, also known as ISIS or ISIL, is now facing a concerted attack from a global coalition led by the United States. The US President Barack Obama, in his speech at the United Nations General Assembly yesterday, has vowed to fight the organization through a global coalition. Already the US forces have launched air attacks on the ISIS held territories in Syria and Iraq. British Prime Minister David Cameron has also announced that his country would also join the fight. Even some Islamic countries like Saudi Arabia have joined the US. However, Syria, which is the worst affected apart from Iraq from the ISIS, however, finds itself in a tricky situation. The British Prime Minister has said they cannot support the Syrian government as he blames it for the growth of the ISIS. We will look at this new war on terror led by the United States and discuss if this new strategy to fight it will work and what will be the consequences, and also what India should do if it is asked to join the coalition. To discuss this, I have with me Vivek, Katju, former ambassador, Rana Banerjee, former Special Secretary, Cabinet Secretariat and a security analyst, Professor A.K. Pasha, Director of the Gulf Studies Program at the JNU, and Dr. Waiel Awwad, West Asia analyst and senior journalist. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Katju, I would like to come to you first. You think the US president had no other option but to launch this kind of a attack and seek a global coalition? Because he had been quite, he has had different views on this over the last couple of years.
My impression is that as things had evolved after June, when the IS smashed the Iraqi army in central Iraq and moved swiftly to capture various cities, Mosul, beginning with Mosul, the US president had very little option but to combat it in a concerted way. Now, the strategy of forming a global coalition is not the first example of US trying to have what in the earlier days was called a coalition of the willing. It is interesting that they haven't gone through the UN route, but that they've practiced diplomacy outside the UN system to build this coalition. And it is primarily because they don't want to appear as if they are against Islam as a whole. And that is why it was important for them to get some Arab states on board. Now, the strategy seems to me to be fairly simple, but I don't know whether it will work because it is to degrade the IS facilities and IS capabilities through a sustained air campaign and then to have ground forces move in to take the territory which IS is occupying presently. Now, that might, as far as Iraq is concerned, obviously it will have to be the Iraqi government forces that move in to take the territories in Iraq. But as far as Syria is concerned, it's a difficult task. The Syrian government is still the recognized government.
Yes.
So I'm not quite sure what will they do because you have three parties in Syria at the moment broadly. There is the Syrian government, there is the IS, and there is the other opposition to the Syrian government. So if the Americans and the others, the Europeans and Arabs, hope that it will not be the Syrian government forces, but it will be the other rebels who are against the Syrian government, who will take over the territories which are presently occupied by IS, then that's a recipe for another continuation of the problem. And my last point at this juncture is that you can fight jihadism militarily, but eventually you've got to fight it ideologically and theologically.
Absolutely.
And that has to come from within the Islamic world and more particularly from within the Arab world.
Absolutely. Professor Pasha, there is this inevitable comparison between what happened in 2003 when the US went into Iraq and other countries also joined in. Do you see any comparison between these two situations as of today's situation and what happened in 2003? And if there is no comparison, how do you gauge the present situation?
You see, the 2003 invasion of Iraq, most analysts say it is illegal because the United Nations Security Council or otherwise did not authorize the invasion. And there were about 30 countries or so in that coalition of the willing. They had their own agenda led by the United Kingdom, so on and so forth. It was part of the 9/11 war on terror after invading Afghanistan. And the initial pretext was WMD and so on and so forth, which they could not locate even to this day. And then it was turned into, fight against autocracy.
And a fight for democracy.
To democratize Iraq, even against the will of the people. So we have seen how Iraq has become fractured into Shia, Sunni, Kurdish, and the destruction, death, which has visited Iraq since then. In fact, the genesis of the present crisis goes back to that death and destruction, especially more intensely in the Sunni areas, because the Sunnis who have ruled Iraq for several centuries, for the last 14 centuries, now felt they were deprived of the power centers and given Iran's position and equation in Iraq. It was seen as Shia-led government, and this was vindicated by Nouri al-Maliki's government. But the stark difference is the same people who created the situation since 2003 now have come back to solve the much graver problem with much less commitment from states of the region and beyond, because as you rightly pointed out, only 3 or 4 countries have committed their air forces, France and Britain, and along with America and some other
France has not
countries.
joined them as yet.
No, France has bombed a couple of places there. But otherwise, none of the countries are willing to send their soldiers as they did in 2003, because they have seen the death of injury of so many soldiers who were part of the willing coalition of the willing. And that is one reason. The second reason is it is sucking more and more regional countries. And instead of solving the problem, it is aggravating and sucking these new players, apart from Iran, Lebanon, Turkey. More players are being...
Who are these new players?
Saudi Arabia, for example.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, Kuwait, UAE, these are Jordan, for example. So these are the new countries apart from...
No, but as Mr. Katju was pointing out, that they want it to be seen as not against Islam per se, but against these extreme elements of Islam. So they want having these Islamic countries with them is a very essential aspect of this strategy, probably.
No, this war on terror since 9/11 also was war on terror, but actually it was war against Islam. In other words,
yes,
against Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and even they were willing to support the Israelis that Arafat is the Israeli bin Laden. We have to fight terrorism on the Palestinian cause. So in that way, not many people would take this argument, even if the leader of the OIC or Saudi Arabia joins that, because the credibility of all these partners, you all know how bad it is, the legitimacy and credibility. So in that way, it will only create much more extreme groups to emerge than, because now if you see the Islamic State, although it is linked to Al-Qaeda, it is much more extreme.
It's an extreme form of Al-Qaeda.
And if you try to suppress, there will be more death and destruction both in Iraq and Syria.
What is that? Okay.
Like in Afghanistan, you bombed out the mud houses and created that monster of Al-Qaeda and Taliban, which are going to take over after the Americans and NATO leave Afghanistan, having fought for 14 years.
That's a separate Afghanistan. That's a separate debate. We'll come to that. Rana Banerjee, would you agree with what Professor Pasha says, that this could actually aggravate instead of solving any problems?
Well, it might, but Obama had to.
But you think Obama had no option?
He had no option once there was the execution of the American journalist. And though there is a lot of domestic pressure on Obama not to put boots on the ground, he has to show that he is taking a strong action. and therefore degrade and destroy has 5 components. It will involve airstrikes, and right at the outset on his September 10 speech, Obama made it very clear that these actions would not be against Islam, but it would be against terrorism. And therefore, the 5 components would be airstrikes, degrading the capacity of the terrorists, shrink their territory and space, prevent funds from coming to them, and to
prevent people from
also
joining.
the channels of recruitment. And because the IS is now paying the best to the foreign terrorists that they are recruiting. The going rate is supposed to be $1,000 per terrorist per month. $1,000, which is more than 2.5 times what the terrorists are getting for, say, Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab in Africa. Okay. So naturally, a lot of people are getting attracted.
These are regular jobs.
It would seem so. That is one of the ways in which they are alluring the disgruntled elements from different countries to come and join them. Plus, they have the coffers. They've got control of the banks, and they've got oil fields from where the oil revenues through refineries are coming to them. Refineries are under control of Syria.
I think a couple of refineries have been bombed by the US in the last couple of years.
Yes, but the refineries actually are not under control of the IS. It's the oil fields that are in control of the IS. So they have some sort of an unwritten understanding about refining of oil and how the revenues come back to them. And this is both with the government in Syria and also the outlets for sale in Turkey. So the response of both these countries against IS has been lukewarm for this reason. But nevertheless, the effort is to open a coalition of Arab countries to join in the effort. And now the Saudis are going to train the Free Syrian Army and some other elements. And the Jordanians are going to give intelligence support. And efforts are being made also to rope in UAE and Qatar, though they have been supporting different Sunni elements compared to the Saudis. So there are various schisms. It's a complex situation.
It's a complex situation. There's wheels within wheels there. Awwad, you have to give us the perspective, the West Asian perspective. From whatever the other panelists have said, I'm sure you look at it differently. And Syria, you're a Syrian, you come from Syria. Syrian government seems to be under attack from both sides now.
Yeah, absolutely. See, the chronology of American intervention in the region give us a very bad history of American intervention in the region. To be very straightforward in this, the American realized for the last 10 years that they have been losing ground. A, because they are more interested in the Asia-Pacific region, that they are pulling their troops. So the other countries start filling the gaps, like the Russia, like the Chinese, like the Iranian. And they realized that to come back to the Arab world, you have to create a monster. So this monster was created. It's a Trojan horse to bring back American back into the forefront. What we are seeing now is different scenario. The Americans were watching what was going on in the region. They were watching the Arab Spring. And then when they realized that they have to step in, they took the forward step. Now they are leading the attack on the Syria. And because their first aim is to a regime change. They might have the different tactic now, telling to the rest of the world, Obama can say the UN, that he is attacking a global terror organization. No doubt it's a threat, but not only after it kills the 2 Americans. Syrian army has been fighting them for the 3.5 years. We have been telling to the world that this is that the terrorist organization, we need your support. Not you close your eyes when the Western and Turkey opened the border and Saudi and Qatar were pouring the money in till that monster grew to an extent that you said that this is the time I have to step in. Actually, what the Americans are doing now, it is called the mobile anarchy. And the mobile anarchy, it is going to happen because from the rearrangement of the unwilling coalition that they have made, because none of them are democratic, of course. They are not for democracy. So those people...
Who is not for democracy?
Well, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and all the GCC, they are not the democratic. They are monarchy supporting the American policy in the region. So therefore, you are going for a regime change in the Arab world. Basically, your policy here is to create a kind of an alliance, bring the influence of the American, including with the Wahhabis, inside the region to keep away the Russian and the Iranian and the rest of the secular Arab countries. So you're prevailing back into the region where you're creating the chaos.
But you're talking of keeping Iran out, but The British Prime Minister had a
It is a
meeting with the
tactical
Iranian.
things. It is not a full, they are not giving you the full objective, the blueprint of what they are going for. The American will go now, they attack. Tomorrow they will widen the scope of their attack. Why you are attacking now only this part? You are helping the Syrian government? No. But they are saying at the other hand, we are not helping the Syrian government.
No,
we
but
wanted to change the regime.
why?
Iran is coming in the picture because they wanted the nuclear 5+1. They have already reached a deal with the Iranian that they wanted Iran to compromise on this issue of Syria and in Yemen and in Lebanon. So therefore, stepping Iran at this stage serve their own objectives, at the tactical one.
Okay, I'll take your point, but tell me, is it necessary now for a global fight against this organization or not? Is it not, or do you think that the countries in that region will be able to tackle this organization?
It is a gimmick. It is a scenario, it's been created. If you wanted really to destroy this organization, it's very simple. Close the border of Turkey, stop funding and arming them, and let the people of the region attack them. I can assure you within 3 months there will be no ISIS in the whole part of the Arab world. But when you allow this monster to grow and the foreign fighters to come in, we have lost 250,000 Syrian, among of them 50% of them are security and soldiers. Nobody raised an eyebrow. We have people being shot and decapitated the head. For thousands of people in front of the cameras, nobody raised an eyebrow. It's only because of the 2 Americans who came in and it's national interest? No. Come on, we are grown up, we are mature enough to understand the game plan.
Mr. Katju?
Look,
it's a very interesting thing what he has said. How do you look at this?
Look, my own impression is that there may have been with the American neocons a desire for regime change. That is well known. They had a plan. But let's look at the reality which exists today. Today, at least as far as I can see from an Indian perspective, one is faced with an organization like the IS. The IS is an extreme form of Wahhabi theology and ideology. Is it something which is good for the region and for countries like India or not? Quite clearly, it is not. Does it have to be combated? Yes. Are the countries of the region united enough? Is the Islamic world and the Arab world united enough to combat it? No. So therefore, someone has to do it. Now, whether it is part of a large-scale American conspiracy is an issue which can be debated. There are no hard facts, no hard realities, only inferences can be drawn. I am looking at the reality as it exists today, and today it has to be combated. And I have already said in my opening remarks that at the end of the day, theologically and ideologically, it will have to be combated from within the Arab world and within the Islamic world. But I cannot accept the proposition that the IS is something which is a manifestation of true Islam. I'm not a Muslim, but it seems to me that it cannot be accepted.
No, Mr. Katju, I don't think Waiel said that it is true Islam.
It is a radicalism. They just using the Islam as a name. There's nothing Islamic on them, not at all. Even the Islamist world have denounced it.
It is not. It has to be combated.
Right. Professor Pasha, if it has to be combated, there is this, as Mr. Banerjee was pointing, it's a very complex situation. While thinks that, there is a greater conspiracy behind what the Americans are doing. He has a point when he says that all these days, all these months, all these years, months and years, when there were so many people being killed by the same forces, the Western forces kept their eyes away from that. Now, why they are doing this? Is it just because 2 Americans were killed?
I will take you back to Libya. It was the Americans and NATO who worked for the overthrow of Gaddafi and his regime.
Right.
And within a year, the American ambassador was killed by the same people.
Right.
By the same groups who were trained, armed, financed, supported, so on and so forth. And then the Americans had to close their consulate and embassy, and the rest of the Western world followed through. And
followed suit and abandoned the place.
Yes. I mean, this kind of logic you can apply even in the case of the present situation. But my point here is for at least 6-7 months before the June takeover of Mosul, the Americans had definite information about the expanding capacity of IS or ISIL. because they knew that other smaller Islamic groups who were being financed, trained, armed by Saudi Arabia, Qatar and other Gulf countries, including being trained in Jordan, that all were coalescing behind this Islamic state. And in fact, Obama is on record having said that it doesn't pose a threat. In March or February, he was asked, and he said, it's a small JV company group. We don't have to bother about it. So in that way, they allowed these things to generate and grow out of proportion. And now they are creating this kind of situation that the entire world has to combat and trying to mobilize through the UN General Assembly.
Yes, yes.
No, for example,
One second, I will come to you, Mr. Katju.
The one solid solution could be just to ask the Turks to behave. If they patrol the borders and
You
not
agree
allow.
with Waiel on that?
Yes,
That
even
the local governments can take care of this if the borders are properly taken care of in Turkey.
no, just Turkey and the Kurds, if they are told to behave, this problem can be solved very easily. But they don't want to do this precisely for the reason because they have a larger agenda. And that is, as has been seen, to bring down the Assad regime there, which they could not do so far. And also to frighten the Gulf countries. Because now Saudi Arabia is nervous about the Islamic State because the Shamar tribe and various other northern tribes are moving towards. The Iraqi Sunni tribes now are getting consolidated. There was
Behind the IS.
behind the IS because now they are being targeted. Whatever was left after the American bombing occupation, now it is pushing them towards the IS.
Yes, Mr. Katju.
No, my point is this, that of course the Americans made mistakes. The Americans should have realized the true nature of the IS much earlier. And of course, I think the Americans made a mistake when they wanted regime changes in the Arab world. But today, if someone thinks that the IS can be combated merely by closing the borders, I do not subscribe to that view. The IS has become a fairly sophisticated organization. They are holding territory, they have forces, they have arms, they have access to funds, and they have a certain ideological and theological appeal. So there has to be combat, and now the question is, does it need to be ignored or combated? In my view, it has to be combated.
Absolutely.
No, bombing will not solve the problem.
With the bombing will solve the Mr. Banerjee.
No, I agree with Vivek in the sense that, you see, the capacities now that the IS has on the ground, merely by closing the borders, the local elements will not be able to fight. The Kurdish Peshmergas will need equipment, they will need sophisticated weaponry.
But do you agree with both Pasha and Waiel that this has been again created by, like in Afghanistan, created the Taliban, and now
It's possible to argue that, you see, genie, when genie is taken out of the bottle, it's very difficult to put it back in. But Americans have been making that mistake every now and then. But then, now to contain this, they will need to come in, if not with boots on the ground, but definitely with support. And
air strikes will have any solution.
alone, it will be a long drawn process. You see, the Iranian militias from Iraq will have to fight. The Iraqi army will have to be rejuvenated. And this has, one of the conditions made has been an inclusive government. So Hamad al-Abadi's government will now try to bring in the Sunni tribes from the north and northwest of Iraq.
It's easier said than that. We have been hearing this for the last 2 years, make it more inclusive. It's not happening.
There is a division also, as I mentioned or hinted about, the Saudis are backing some others and the Qataris and the Kuwaitis are backing somebody else. So there is a rift in this.
One more thing is that one of the strategies of this war which they have started now is to train and arm rebels. Now, who are the rebels?
Well,
this is what is going to happen
element. There are the Free Syrian Army is there.
It's obsolete.
And although the Americans were earlier supporting the Harakatul Hazm,
yes,
but their main leader, who was a charismatic guy, he got killed. You see, Hassan Awwad. And now there is a new person called Abu Jabbar who's formed a new outfit called Al-Falaq Al-Khamis, the fifth legend. Now he is more inwardly withdrawn and he's closer to Abu Jawlani of Jabha al-Nasra. So whether these elements would be able to be lured to Saudi Arabia and then trained under the aegis of American funding and Saudi guidance it's a very nebulous concept. It may happen, it may not succeed.
Yeah, this whole business of quickly, while we are running out of time, because I want very quickly others also to say something about India. This training and things like that, where will it lead to? Who are the rebels? David Cameron has been quoted as having said that we can't cooperate with the Syrian government because enemy cannot be a friend in this situation.
Look, this is a chronological crisis in the region. Give me any place the American intervene and the West all over the world, whether they have brought democracy or anarchy to the region. This is one. We are living in a stage where the Americans are telling you, occupy one country and get one free. They went to Afghanistan, they took Iraq. Now they are making coalition of the willing, they want to divide Syria. They are not going there to not only to topple the regime, they are giving Turkey its own share. Israel is creating a free zone area where they are already shut down one Syrian airplane, and they are creating a free zone area like they have done into the south of Lebanon. So it's a similar redrawing of the Arab maps in a manner, in a fashion that the United States wanted to see that more of these small states are more helpful for the United States. They were giving them the self-reliance. Who was buying the oil from these people? The oil was re-siphoned through Turkey, through United States, even to Houston reached the oil. Then where did the hell this oil go from? Come on. This is their financing. You sell me one tank of oil, I'm giving you 100 tanks. All the weapon has come, 65% of the weapon in the IS hand is from the American and the West, according to American sources. Come on. Where did you take it from?
Mr. Katju, we are running out of time. I think when Prime Minister Modi goes to US very shortly, in a few hours, one of the things which you'll be faced with is the US president asking India to join this coalition. You think India should join this coalition?
Well, I think we should have intelligence sharing because Islamist, I'm not using the word Islamic, I'm using the word Islamist terrorism is a grave threat to the Islamic world and to the rest of the world, in my view.
Professor
Because
Pasha?
this is not the essence of Islam. The great faith of Islam
That
is not embodied
everybody
in this.
everybody
And
seems to agree about that.
Therefore, my point is that we must agree, in my view, to a kind of a sharing against international terrorism. And this is part of that combat, not exclusively. And I do believe one point I would say, I think as I've said, the regime change policy must be abandoned. After all, governments have to be strengthened now.
The one point
Yes.
I would like to make is I think we should not identify with any coalition if it doesn't have UN authorization. We must wait for any serious effort. Number two, any action or attempt to join this will have implications for our workers there and at the
Within the
domestics.
country also? Within India
the country also it might inflame situation. So in that way, we have to be careful about our interest in the region and what other extremist groups might do or attempt to do with other groups. There are a lot of opposition groups within the countries where our workers are gainfully employed.
Mr. Banerjee.
Well, there will be a UN General Assembly resolution after this, so we can at least pledge support to preventing, flow of recruits from here. Our main threat will
Which
be
has happened already. It has been happening.
Yes, and our former National Security Advisor spoke in the IISS yesterday saying that at least about 150 Indian recruits have already joined IS.
Okay.
So to prevent that, and our main threat will be from the body of trained elements across the border in our west. But apart from that, the Indian Mujahideen, who, if there are some such elements in Iraq, Abdul Qadir Sultan, he is supposed to be recruiting such elements from different parts of Bhatkal and Hyderabad and Deoband and all these places. In Darbhanga, from all these Azamgarh. So we have to see when these people come back to arrest them strongly, to sort of debrief them and to prevent the spread of such elements.
But not join this coalition overtly.
I mean, formally we can't do anything in that area. It's territorially remote. So we have to extend solidarity by preventing the flow of recruits.
Okay.
I have two things to make.
Very quickly.
A, India should not intervene at any cost. India has to stay neutral in this position. If you wanted really to have an indigenous Indian position, go and send your people to the ground, get the feelers from inside and get your own assessment. B, it is still an early stage to say what is the next step for the United States. Are they going to attack the Syrian government? What Russia and Iran will do? Bystander? Maybe the outcome of the Syrian war will really reshape the new world order.
Okay, that's very interesting what you said. On that note, we have to end. This is something which will have to be observed very closely. People have strong divergent views on this, and what the US will do, what the other countries which are being invited by the US to join the coalition will do will be worth watching closely. Thanks to all my guests, Vivek, Katju, AK, Pasha, Rana, Banerjee and Waiel, Awwad. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture same time tomorrow.